The Terps momentum needs to continue against Minnesota.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com. And I'm also doing work over at InsideBlackandGold.net. Make sure you guys go over to Inside Black and Gold for all your latest Terps news. Maryland's momentum that they just had from winning that huge game against USC has to continue going into this weekend's game against the Minnesota Golfers. I think it's easy to get up when you play certain teams every single year, and I think that's no matter the sport. There are certain teams or certain people that you play every single year, whether it's football, basketball, whatever team you are, whatever league you're in, there's usually, no matter the level too, you can get up for certain games. Like usually it's rivalry games, teams are always going to get up to, or when you play somebody that you know is in terms of Maryland's case, when you play somebody that has a really high ranking or is a really big brand. Like we always played Ohio State, Penn State every single year. Like those two games Michigan would always be three games that Maryland would always feel like they would get up for. Even if we got blown out, there was a lot of energy surrounded those types of games. In the olden days when Maryland used to be the ACC and they used to, in basketball, play teams like Duke and those types of matchups, it seems like they would always get up for those games. It's easy to create momentum when you're playing a team like USC, like Maryland did last week, or maybe it's like the first game of the season and you're all excited. But there's other games where it can be more tricky to play with the same energy, to play with the same momentum that you've had in the past. And I think part of the reason that we started getting ourselves in the hole is because we couldn't create any momentum this season. Before this USC game, we were in kind of a hole where we had a lot of trouble kind of getting going, getting things on the right path, getting stuff on the right track. I think especially after the Villanova game, we had a lot of trouble kind of getting things going where we lost to Indiana and then that doubled to the Northwestern loss where we got absolutely demolished. But you had USC coming to your place, a game that I think a lot of people marked on their schedule as probably our biggest home game that we were going to have the opportunity to play this year. And I think a lot of fans, a lot of the players, a lot of the coaches, a lot of people surrounding the program were really excited to play a USC team. We got up for that. It seemed like we were really excited. It seems like they were pumped up. It seems like a lot of fans showed up. And I think that's exactly what happened. And I think there's a lot of momentum going into that game. And then Northwestern, the week before that, I think it was a game we thought we could kind of just go through the motions and win the game kind of just anyway. Like we didn't have to play our best. We didn't have to really get hyped. We didn't have to have a lot of energy. And we ended up getting smacked. But against USC, despite being down, we still had a lot of energy coming out the half, even being down 21-7. And we were able to do something special, come back and beat the USC Trojans to get us our first Big Ten win of the season. And now you have a really interesting spot against Minnesota where I think it can be easily a letdown spot where you just created a ton of momentum after beating USC and you kind of just push by Minnesota and you say, yeah, it's a Big Ten game. Yeah, they might be a solid program, but we just beat USC. We can handle Minnesota. We can handle the Golfers. They haven't been that great this year. We can handle them. But I think that's the opposite of what you need to do. all this momentum that you have from beating USC, all this type of energy, the fans rushing the field, all the recruits being there, and all different Instagram accounts and all these different things posting about Maryland football, you got to continue that momentum headed into the Minnesota game, because I'm telling you, Minnesota, they're not amazing. They're not great. I wouldn't even say they're good. They're an okay, solid Big Ten football team. They're not awesome. They're not horrible. To to be fair, to be honest about them, when you look at their scores and you look what they have done, they're definitely not like a top flight type of Big Ten team, but they're solid. They're good enough. They beat USC similar to us. They beat UCLA. UCLA does have the best team. They only lost to Michigan by 3. They got crushed. Not just, but they got crushed by Iowa a couple weeks ago. But I think when you look at this game at 3:30 on Saturday against the Minnesota Golfers, you can't say, yeah, we're just going to go to Minnesota and we're going to win that game. You got to continue that momentum, and you got to play with the same energy that you did behind your home crowd against Minnesota. And if that happens, I guarantee the Terps will win that game. If they play with the same type of technique, attention to detail, not worried about making mistakes, flying around, yeah, things are going to happen. That's how a football game goes. But if you play that way against Minnesota, you're going to beat the Minnesota Golfers. But if you come out flat and you're not having the same type of attention to detail, and if you get down early and you don't have that same type of will to come back, you're going to lose that game against Minnesota. And I think momentum's a really tricky thing to kind of put your finger on, but I do think it's something that matters, and I do think it's something that's really important. And I think that the Terps have a ton of it right now, and you have to figure out a way to put all that momentum that you have from beating USC and honestly, I think Mike Locksley is one of his biggest wins of the year. I think beating USC was one of his biggest wins of his career at Maryland. I'm curious when I really go back and look what wins are bigger than that. I think in terms of the brand of USC and kind of what they've been in the past and the pedigree of Lincoln Riley and who he is as a coach and what he's known for and the popularity of that USC program, I think it's one of Mike Locksley's biggest wins, if not his biggest win. And I saw someone in the comment section say, which is something I don't completely believe in, but I do think there's some truth to it. If you lose to Minnesota, this is what the comment said in my comment section. It said, if the Terps lose to Minnesota, then it doesn't matter that they beat USC. And I think that I hope the players are thinking that, and I hope they feel that. As a person that talks about the team, I don't think that's true. I still think there's a lot of value in beating USC, even if they somehow drop to Minnesota. But I do think there is some truth in that, in saying that you got to go on the mindset. It's like, who cares now? I know you guys heard that like type of saying. It's like you win one game, who cares? Like, let's make the next play. And I think that's what you have to do in this case. If you lose to Minnesota, that win against USC is just going to feel like a big upset, in that the Terps people are going to more look at it as a USC loss, and less about Maryland actually winning the game. But if Maryland can create some momentum, get to a bowl game, win these games that we need to get to a bowl game, then people are going to look back at the season and they can take away a lot more positives besides just, oh, yeah, we beat USC, but we didn't do much else. They can look at it as, oh, we were able to turn this season around. Oh, we were able to beat USC, yeah, but we also were able to get back on track in Big Ten play. We were able to make it to a bowl game, and we made a lot of progress. We had the fans rushing the field the first time that we've been in the Big Ten. You could look at a lot of different things if you were able to continue this momentum against Minnesota. But if you stop and it's like, oh, we beat Minnesota, people are just going to look at that loss and say, what was Lincoln Riley doing? They lost to that Maryland team. That Maryland team was horrible all year. And so you want that win to have meaning as we get farther and farther away from it. And you also just want to win another Big Ten game against Minnesota. And so I think that the Terps have to continue that momentum next week going into the Minnesota game. And if they don't, I'm going to be disappointed, because it's like, we saw it against USC. We saw what this program's capable of. We saw what happens when everybody gets on the same page, and it's not mistake-free football, but you play really hard and you play careless football. Not careless in terms of you're just all over the place, but you don't care about making mistakes, and you just go out there and run around and not let your mind be free. And then if they go into USC or to Minnesota, and look tight, it's not going to be a good look. So I do think the Terps need to continue their momentum against Minnesota. The Terps defense did a lot of better things against USC that I haven't seen them do all year. I'll talk about that. Can they continue doing that against Minnesota? I'll talk about that after this ad from LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role. That's why you can check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I thought a big part of Maryland winning that game against USC was the Terps defense was honestly a lot better. I thought in the first half, I don't want to say it was shaky, but in the second half, really impressed. We held USC to only 7 points in the second half, and giving up 28 points to USC in the entire game, honestly, to me, isn't the end of the world. To a Lincoln Riley team that we have seen USC in the past put up some big boy numbers in terms of points. It feels like when they were in the Pac-12, it's a different thing over here in the Big Ten. But when they're Pac-12, it seems like all their games would be in like the 40-point games, like 50-point games. We've seen Lincoln Riley be able to dial stuff up. And that was one of my main concerns was how is Maryland's defense going to be able to stop Miller Moss? I thought we weren't going to be able to completely stop them, and we didn't. We didn't completely stop them. Miller Moss definitely did some things against our defense and was definitely able to get things going. But this is the thing about the Terps defense this year that I have said. Play bend, but don't break defense. I don't think we quite have the talent this year to just say, line it up, we're just going to stop you, and we don't have to worry about much because we have such strong position groups everywhere. Like, we're not that type of defense. And a lot of college defenses are like this. We're a defense that needs to play. Yeah, we might give up a little bit of yardage. Yeah, we might get up some shorter, even intermediate stuff, but we're not going to give you the long ball. We're not going to give you deep stuff in coverage. And I think the defense did some of that against Miller Moss. He was still able to go 34 of 50 for 336 yards and 3 touchdowns, which obviously is a pretty good stat line. But I do think that overall our defense did a much better job. I'm going to start with the secondary. I thought they did a much better job of forcing Miller Moss to not allow him to get the ball deep down the field to some of their talented receivers that they have. And I thought in the past, we've given up some huge chunk plays, like humongous chunk plays in the passing games against teams against Michigan State, and Aiden Shiles, who hasn't looked great all year. We gave up some huge plays to him in their passing game, as well as Indiana. We gave up some. Even at Virginia, we gave up some. But USC, we were able to limit the big plays, and Glendon Miller and Kevin Thomas and Perry Fisher all were really good in the back end of our defense, preventing them to get those big type of plays, because everybody knows that those plays, those like huge passing attacks and those huge passing gains and the big play battle. I think Mike Loxley talks about this. Often whoever wins the big play battle is going to win the game. So in terms of creating big plays on offense, is something that is a real indicator on who's going to win. And the defense, yeah, we gave up over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to Miller Moss, but we didn't give them a bunch of easy outs and a bunch of easy plays down the field. We really forced them to be able to move the ball somewhat methodically, which I thought we've struggled with this year. So I think the cornerback in the secondary game plan was much better. It didn't feel like he was just dotting us up and that he was in control for the entire game, which was definitely something that was important for the Terps. I also thought the defensive line played a good enough game. I thought they created pressures and spots. I thought we did a good job of also doing some blitz packages, which I haven't seen us do much of. And I thought we did a decent job against their rushing attack. Their one kid, Jacavius Marks, I think I'm saying that right, had 17 carries for 18 yards. He averaged 4.8 yards per carry, so that's nothing where I'm like going crazy about. Like, that's not a bad job by our defensive line. And this other kid, Quinton Joyner, had 3 carries for 6 yards, so we did a good job with him as well. He only averaged 2.0 yards per carry. So I think overall we did a good job of rushing them. I thought we did a good job of making Miller Moss feel uncomfortable. Shout out to Quayshawn Fuller. He got home for a sack. And he also recorded 4 pressures. I didn't realize. And Donnell Brown did as well, who played a lot on the edge. So I thought that our defensive line unit honestly played pretty well. It's not perfect. It's not like, oh, we just absolutely dominated them. That's not what we are as a program. And I think that the more we realize that, then the better we're going to be. We're a team that has really solid players. We don't have a bunch of NFL first rounders up there. We're not Georgia, where it's like, oh, we're just going to be able to rush 4 every single time, and then our guys are going to get home, and we got 2 shutdown corners that are going to go in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, and we don't have to worry about giving up big plays, and we can push up and play press man. Like, that's not what we are. We're a team that it's going to have to run a little softer stuff, but we're going to have to force the offense to play methodically, and the defensive line is going to have to play solidly enough, and we're going to create the plays when they're there. And that's a recipe to beating a team like USC. And I thought the Terps did a really good job on defense, defensively, rebounding and having a really solid game against a USC offense that's really talented, forcing them to 28 points. I honestly don't think is that bad for a USC team, and then especially 7 points in the second half. Let's talk a little bit more recruiting. We talked about some yesterday, but there's more recruiting I want to get into. I'll talk about that after this ad from FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-plays, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Guys, there's so many different things you can bet on. The NBA just came back last night. I know a lot of you guys probably watch that, as well as the NFL's in full swing and college football as well. And then the MLB World Series will be on as well soon. So there's so many different things, all the major sports you can bet on right now on FanDuel. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. So I do want to talk about a little bit of recruiting. I have one piece of bad news and then one piece of good news for the Terps. It's a little bit of mixture between basketball and football. So let's can't talk right now. Let's start with the bad news. The Terps lose out on Cam Ward, which did kind of hurt, but we also kind of expected it. It hurts less when you kind of expect it. But I talked about it a little bit yesterday that he's making his decision. I felt like it was between Michigan State and Maryland. And it did feel like Michigan State was going to pull away for Cam Ward, the power forward that has a really high upside. 247 makes it sound like 6'7", 210 from Maryland. So I think that's why a lot of people felt that Maryland was really in the mix, and we were in his top schools. Definitely a guy that we wanted to land. Ranked 50th ranked nationally, the 14th ranked power forward on 247 composite, 2 in the state of Maryland. Definitely a guy that we wanted, and definitely a guy that Tom Izzo is going to really like using. And we'll see how he transitions into the Big Ten, and we'll probably get to play him, or we will get to play him every single year. So we'll see how he looks as a Big Ten player, but definitely a guy that kind of hurt that we missed out on. But I do think that I like our 2025 class, so I don't think it's the end of the world. He had a really productive EYBL season. He averaged 20.7 rebounds, 2 assists, so you can't really ask for much more than that. But 6'7", he's a 4. His frame is solid, but a lot of people just think his upside's really high as a player, which obviously you don't want to hear about if it's a guy that you lost out on. But I get why you go to Michigan State. Blue blood. Izzo's a really good coach, and they got a lot of good things going on over there. I think Alabama was also in the mix, in Kansas State. I think that was his top 4, what I saw. But it hurts definitely a little bit, but definitely not the end of the world for Maryland basketball. I think if Derek Queen ends up not coming back and goes to NBA, that's where it might hurt a little bit, not having a guy like this coming in. But if Derek Queen is back, then I feel good about. So now for the good news. It sounds like we're very much in the race, and I know we've been talking a lot about 2025s, but soon we're going to be transitioning to 2026 recruits. And Mike Locksley has a chance to land his biggest recruit ever for the Terps, and Zion Ely, edge rusher from Baltimore, Maryland, attends St. Francis Academy, a school where we get a lot of different guys from. It's a powerhouse in Baltimore, one of the best programs, high school programs in the nation. And 247 has this kid ranked as the second-ranked player in the class of 2026, the number 1 edge player and the number 1 player in the state of Maryland. He's 6'3.5", 220. Sounds like he has all the tools and looks to be like a straight dude. And I think that he visited during the USC game, and it sounds like Maryland picked up a lot of momentum after that. And that's why I say when you beat a team like USC at home, when recruits are there and all this different extra stuff happens, and you get people rushing the field, and there's a lot of good that can come out of that. And when you have a guy like Zion Ely that's at the game, he said that it changed his perspective of Maryland after that game. And this kid's a local kid, top 15, top 10. 247 has him as a top 2 player in the class. And so he's a kid that, if Maryland's able to land at the edge spot, could be a humongous add for the Terps. Never easy to get a guy like that, just because we know the Bamas of the world and those different people end up getting those guys. But I do think that is definitely a guy that Maryland's going to be really, really trying hard to get. And I think that's a guy you put all your eggs in the basket and say, we want you to come to Maryland. Whatever NIL money, throw at that kid. Whatever you can do, throw at that kid. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.